411 Live.
Where you can learn about issues that impact us every day. State of world, 411 Live.
Real people, real talk.
Made to help people in our community in every way. For your girl, 411 Live.
Around 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that was seen as noble, something we needed, something that was necessary. Now we're in 2025, and the tide has turned. And now DEI is seen as something to be eliminated, something to delete from websites. All these different things are happening. So how do you advocate for a marginalized individual in this climate? Hello, everyone. I'm Beverly Taylor, and this is the 411 Live. Real people, real talk. We're going to talk about this, and I have a special guest who is very versed in this area, Latish Reed. I should say Dr. Latish Reed. Welcome to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. And you have a book, and I want to look and make sure I get this title right. The Complexities of Equity, Navigating Shades of Gray in Schools and Organizations. You are, your background, I mean, you've been an educator. There are a lot of facets to your resume, and you have studied this, and you're an expert in this area. The phrase diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, as I have mentioned, all of a sudden, it's not this phrase that's seen as noble or something to be achieved. How do you view it, this climate that we're in right now?
Well, I think you pinned the tail on the donkey. You got it right. And literally in the introduction of my book, I talk about the ebbs and flows of this work.
Yeah.
And I literally talk about how at the 2020, we were all in the house. Mm-hmm. You know, I have a friend. She's a professor down at UT Austin. Shout out, Tasha. She said Rona and racism. So coronavirus and racism, when we all witnessed the murder of George Floyd in real time, and the whole world just was like, this is outrageous. And in retrospect, I really think a lot of it had to do with people being cooped up in the house. Mm-hmm, so all of a sudden, the streets were flooded with people that some of them had been beating this drum forever. And then others were like, oh, I need to understand what's happening in my world, in my community, in my neighborhood. And so there it was. And everybody, companies that hadn't even thought about anything that had to do with equality, justice, racial, anything, then began to put these statements out. And as you mentioned, it was very noble, and there was lots of resources put into these positions, not always the resources to make the sustainable changes, but there were chief diversity, equity, inclusion officers, so on and so forth. And then, as you said, 5 years later, the tide has literally turned a whole 180.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It really has. In your experience, you've climbed quite a bit. So in your experiences, where does this all fall? I mean, why did you focus on this?
Well, it's really interesting, Beverly. I saw a friend of mine. She is a physician in Madison, Dr. Allison Craig. We went to high school together. And when I was 16 years old, I went to Badger Girl State, and she was she was elected to be the governor. I was the chairperson of my party. We both were elected to go to the national convention out in Washington, D.C., first time on an airplane, the whole nine.
Right.
My school interviewed me, 16 years old, and they wanted to know what was most important, what was most salient. And I said it was a lot of great opportunities and we had great experiences, but I sensed there was some racial discrimination going on. So I've been sensitive to this my entire life. A lot of it has to do with the experiences that I've had in my identity. But at the same time, this has just been something that has been of concern to me since I became a school teacher. I was a school teacher and I worked at Andrew Douglas Community Academy and Malcolm X. I was an assistant principal there, but I understood that I was serving some of the students that had been left behind. Both of those schools were predominantly Black, low socioeconomic status, and it was my mission to work with folks that wanted to do something to uplift our community. And so that's like a up close and personal situation, but then when you look abroad, you can see how inequities impact what can happen and what those opportunities for those students are. So then I went to UW-Madison, and I ultimately got a PH.D. in educational leadership and policy analysis, and that entire program is based on studying equity and training leaders to be more equitable and how they work with their staff, students, allocate resources, and so forth. So it's just, it's a thing.
Right.
It's a thing.
So with this book, what are you hoping the reader gets from it?
Okay, so I want people to be more reflective. So the book, there is some research based, but it's primarily based on my observations of people trying to enact equitable outcomes. So again, as we mentioned, everybody has a statement about how we want to serve all students. We want to do all of those things, equitable, equity, equality, justice, because we can take away the DEI title. That doesn't mean that people aren't going to always advocate for those that have less. So we have those things in our missions. But as I was trying to do the work as a named officer, I realized that people just really struggle with actually doing the right thing.
Right.
That's a theme in my book, too, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. But we know that at the end of the day, your actions have to match the words. And so my book really is a reflective tool to get people to think about, I believe these things, but what am I willing to actually do?
Yes. Yeah. So you break it down. And like you've kind of said, you don't have to be an academic scholar to grasp what you're talking about. And I like how you skillfully introduce equity empowerment continuum. I mean, you use the shades of gray, which is in the title of the book, and you kind of show us where that, you can say it, but are you doing it? How do you do it? What the levels that people fall into. So I just want to kind of just start with it. You got a white phase, right? And you kind of mention in this phase avoidance, absence of action. So is this the phase where you're not trying to do anything?
So I think one of the things is we look at people, outcomes, and we know these things. We don't always need people to say, oh, well, we need a committee to study. No. We know what it is, but we refuse to do something about it. Now, in that phase, it's like we can kick the can down the road, right? And that's more light gray. Like we're trying to do something, but when we understand what's happening and we choose to not act, then you are in the white phase. And I want to be clear, I am not talking about skin color.
Right.
Because remember, we're talking about shades of gray.
Right.
And so ultimately, the other end of the spectrum is black actions, which is justice for the people that we're seeking. But in that first phase, we literally are not doing anything, or we are actively doing things to dial back the progress that has been made. And as you know, when we spoke in our pre-conversation, I started writing this book in 2017, had no idea that we would be here today. And so when you think about things in our culture, society, I'm going to say it, I'm 52 years old.
And looking great.
Thank you. But I've never known a world where a woman didn't have a right to choose.
Yeah.
And so that to me is like dialing back options for women. When we think of things like affirmative action, and we know all of the rhetoric around it, but at the end of the day, when we take options off the table for people that don't get to come to the table and dismiss it as something, oh, that's a DEI hire, all of that kind of stuff, we are dialing back opportunities for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we get to the other shades, one of the things that always puzzles me is why do if the bottom of the spectrum, so to speak, you're the lowest economic group, if that group is lifted up, as you lift more people up, the better everybody is. And I get the sense that people don't seem to get that. There's this mentality of kind of stepping over people. But if we lift everybody up, we all benefit. But for some reason, that doesn't always register.
I think it was President Kennedy that said, a rising tide catches all boats. And there are pieces of equity that we don't necessarily even recognize that we all benefit from. So, for example, for people that have disabilities that might need a wheelchair, and, I believe it probably was in the 70s or so where they decided to cut the curb so people can roll easily. But that benefits so many people. It benefits a person that's moving a stroller for a baby. It benefits people that, I said I was 52, my knees a little interesting these days. So, it benefits a number of people in the classroom when we make sure that we are serving all needs of all students. Even the students that don't need accommodations, they actually benefit from things being broken down in different ways.
Yeah.
So to your point, there is this fear that if I help my brother, then, I might miss out on something.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day, that's really not how it is.
Right.
Because you already got what you need.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So getting back to the book. Okay, so we've got the white face, and I think misinformation is in there too, right? And then we go to the light gray. And what all goes into the light gray phase?
Light gray is that performative thing. And in the book, I really assert that a lot of what we see is very performative. So when you have the statement, but then there's nothing to support the statement, or there are no artifacts of the work that you intend to do, then that is performative. And I talk about, I literally talk about Starbucks. So, Starbucks, folks love them some Starbucks.
Right.
And I'm not going to lie and say I haven't enjoyed a few hot drinks myself. But they've always seem to struggle with their messaging lining up with the actions, right? And so I talk a lot. I even talk a little bit about the situation that happened right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where they called the police on Dontre Hamilton. Yeah. And, that is so those things sort of don't match. They at one point in their history, they had some other issues with race, and they wanted to have their baristas let's talk about race, but they hadn't trained anybody to talk about race. It made everybody uncomfortable. But, they took it off the table. They've also talked a lot about, people talk about the gentrification that they do in a lot of our communities. But then they've come back and then they've given large sums of money. So it's like you have to line those actions up with the mission. And, you know, in the book, some of my examples, you can read for yourself if you feel like they've done enough to, you know, really move the needle in terms of equity or equality in some of the neighborhoods that they serve. Yeah.
Sometimes the efforts need to be tweaked.
And to their credit, I do feel that when things happen, and it's usually when things become public or, you know, it's a media thing, now we got to figure out what to do, right? But if we start thinking about how do we have this message, and if this is our message, like we're strong in it. So will you even think about folks like Costco, right? Costco was like, this is what we do. When everything came, you know, to pass, they were like, this is what we're still going to do. And so those are some examples of how folks need to just make their mind up and then follow that path to the end result of more equitable outcomes for folks that need it.
Sounds good. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more. We're going to get into more variations in the shades of gray. Stay with us. You're listening to the 411 Live.
Hate is loud. It gets clicks. It gets attention. Hate, however, is actually quite small. But love is the majority, filling up something far more important than any feed. Love fills our hearts, our lives, our every day with understanding, empathy, and compassion, leaving hate to become what it truly is, a whisper.
My opponent is completely disregarding almost half of my arguments which I responded to.
Communities must step up
Laws
and
alone
protest
cannot
against this
stop the
normalization.
bullying.
Well, I completely disagree.
Point of inquiry, do you guys even realize that the #1 killer of children and teens are gun injuries?
You're probably starting to realize now, this is not a debate.
There is no adult in this earth that wants children to die.
I worry for my kids.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/team up.
Welcome back to the 411 Live. My guest is Latish Reed, and she has written a very informative book titled The Complexities of Equity, Navigating Shades of Gray in Schools and Organizations. And we've talked about the white phase and the light gray phase. Something I wanted to ask you about, too, was when we talked about the DEI and the efforts that organizations try to do, whereas they might say, okay, we're going to do something. We're going to put somebody in a role, director of DEI, you know, that kind of thing. There was a time where everybody was looking for a DEI person. Everybody's not qualified for that, right? I'm Black, but I'm not qualified. Mm-hmm. So that we got into that as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I do little YouTube clips and social media things, and I did a video about who actually benefits from DEI and who actually held the roles. 76% of those positions were held by white people.
Really?
Google it. And I think it was about maybe 4% of DEI directors are Black folk.
That's surprising to me.
Absolutely. And so this whole notion around DEI hires and all of that, so who's actually benefiting, we have to understand that that's rhetoric.
Right.
It's rhetoric.
Right. Because when you don't have the lived experiences, that takes away. And then there's the skill set, too. I mean, there's a lot to DEI. I mean, I can look at things and I can talk about experiences that I've been through, but to have the research and all those things that's really necessary to properly bring about this program is very important. Mm-hmm. So I always wondered, I hope this person has the expertise necessary and not just there because they can say, well, I hired a black person.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing is that DEI isn't just about race. So we're looking at immigration, we're looking at language, we're looking at gender identity, we're looking at just a number of facets. And so it's not just about race, and I think that is a misconception. Mm-hmm. And so these people, I'm not saying that people who have DEI roles are not qualified, because they most definitely could have everything that they need, but they're addressing a number of marginalized groups as well. So
that's a great point. So when we get to the dark gray, we've got the white, the light gray. When we get to the dark gray, what are we talking about here?
So in my book, I have another framework that I sort of lay as the foundation of your ability, your empowerment. Mm-hmm. It's called the ICE-T framework. Okay. So ICE-T stands for your identity, your context, your experience, and the timing. And so in the dark gray phase, what you are doing is you are maximizing those things to make change. Mm-hmm. So for example, we talked about the timing of everything.
Yes.
When you believe that you are called to do something, great, but it might not be the time. But like that floodgate opened in 2020, and it was a time that a lot of people bought books and were learning more about some of the things that people have been saying for years, but it just happened to be the right time. Well, fast forward 5 years later, the work has to be done differently, because literally, if we are, like you said, deleting the term DEI and we're deleting all of the history and all of those types of things, how do we regroup and figure out how to continue to move forward? And so capitalizing off of the things that you do have going in your favor, your identity. As a Black woman doing DEI work, it was difficult because, again, people think, oh, it's only about race. But I was talking about gender. I was talking about gender identity, all kinds of other special education, everything. And so what I needed to learn to do was engage my other colleagues. I might have a colleague share some information. It could be the same information, but it might be received because he or she had a different identity. Yeah. And so instead of being upset about that, I was like, okay, let me delegate. Right. Yeah. And so thinking about how to use the networks of folks that have the identity that might be able to carry the ball across the finish line.
Looking at your audience.
Absolutely.
Who are you speaking to?
Right. And so it's almost like I called a thing a thing. Yeah. You remember Iyanla had her show, Fix Your Life, and she would say, let's call a thing a thing. Yeah. And so while I was doing the work, it didn't feel good. Mm-hmm. But in my reflection, I was like, I had a whole network of people that were around me that had the same similar messages, and they were able to take the ball farther than I was. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, that's good.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good. So in the dark gray, we're putting things in action.
We are having policies, right? Mm-hmm. We're putting, I call it written accountability. right? So there's one thing to put it in the mission, but then what are the actual measurements that we're looking at so that we can measure our progress over time? We want to talk about customer service, how we treat people. Like, what are those specific things that we are doing to make sure that all people feel that they are welcome or they belong? So that's a written piece that companies and organizations need to have.
That's good. That's good. Okay. So we get to dark gray, then we get to black.
Yeah. So I classified the black phase by 3 things. Aspiration is first and foremost, and that's why I know that people are really concerned about what they're saying about DEI. And my own father, because he's been there while I've been writing this, and, we have conversations. He was like, girl, that stuff you talking about, they getting rid of that. What you gonna do? I'm like, Dad, like, this is who I am. If we don't call it DEI, I don't know. We can call it whatever we want to call it. It can be the Underground Railroad as far as I'm concerned, but it's the aspiration for all people to be seen and to be treated fairly and for everyone to have access to justice. Yeah. And so that aspiration is always going to be there. And then there are movements. Now, movements are very different than what they used to be in different eras. Social media, there's a lot of movement on social media, but it can be performative. Like, I put up a post, I do an article, and I close my computer and I go on about my life. But what is the new movement around this? And I think we are all still grappling with what that is because things are happening so quickly.
Yeah, it's ever-changing.
Ever-changing. So, but at some point, people will mobilize and there will be a movement around this because, again, we have aspirations. And then finally, the actual codifications in our nation, right? The Constitution has some things about equity, and we're leaning on that, right? But as we know, some of those things are being rolled back. But at the end of the day, there's probably not a pure form of the black phase or any of the phases, but it's just a reflective tool so that we can make sure that we are thinking about how we personally want to move forward, as well as how we want to move our organizations forward in terms of serving people, being just to all, and making sure that we all belong, because these United States are diverse.
There you go. And that's what's important.
Absolutely.
If everybody's doing well, we all benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So where can people get your book?
You can go to corwin.com, corwin.com. It is also available on the Amazon platform.
Congratulations on this book.
Thank
I know
you.
It's been a kind of your baby since 2017.
Yes, everybody that knows me knows I have a 19-year-old son, but that's my guy. Love him dearly. Shout out King Zion. But this was like his little brother since 2017. And so now here we are.
There you go. Good work. Thank you. Thank you for being a guest on the 411 Live. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. I have been talking with Latish Reed, and she, again, is the author of The Complexities of Equity, Navigating Shades of Gray in Schools and Organizations. Thanks again. And thank you for joining us for another episode. Remember, we're a nonprofit, so if you'd like to partner with us, go to our website, the411live.org. Until next time, this is the 411 Live. Real people, real talk. I'm Beverly Taylor. If you would like to check out past episodes, there are many ways. Go to your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Like and watch us on Facebook. Watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have suggestions for future episodes, go to our website, the411live.org.